Dave Scott, Hub Media interview today. I get to talk to Lucia. I told you I was going to do that. Bellafante. I said I was going to mess up your name, and I knew I would.
Okay.
A local author who writes unbelievably great books for kids. One of your first was Peter's Pocket. We're going to talk about that today. But you live in Dover. Give me some history of how you ended up there, what this is all about, and how you started writing. I mean, you're an author, a speaker, an educator, a coach. You do it all.
You're so sweet. So it will be 6 years this summer that we moved to Dover. And let me tell you, I absolutely love it. When we first moved here, I used to say it was the best kept secret. But I think more and more people have found out about it, sadly. But I love it here. We moved because we were in Vaughan, and I've always wanted to live out in the country. And so for me, this is country. It's lovely. We back onto the farm, and so I see nothing but field and sometimes cows and the willow trees back there. And it's like a perfect setting to sit in my she shed and write.
It's a relaxed environment. Then you go into Dover and you got the water. It's all there for you. It's perfect, isn't it?
It is perfect. I mean, I can walk downtown in like 20 minutes and just be where the people are, or be here where it's a little bit more quiet in the summer. It's a perfect environment.
Awesome. That's really cool. So let's get into this a little bit let's get a little bit of your background first,
Sure.
because the books are great, but let's talk a little bit about who you are and how you got to this point.
So I started out my career being an educator. I got my Montessori training, and I was a Montessori Casa teacher for 3 years. And then I went back to school and I became an Ontario College of Teachers teacher, certified teacher. And I taught in a classroom for a few years. Then I stayed home when my son was born. And when my son was my second child, but when he was born, he presented as blind. And so because I'd had a background in education, I really wanted to give him a good foundation. So I stayed home. And it was when he went to kindergarten, I then went back to work. And instead of going into the classroom, I had actually, when my son was born, felt, this is going to sound crazy maybe to some people, but we like I said, he presented himself as blind. And for me, he was absolutely perfect. And it didn't make me sad that he was blind. And I wasn't worried, because I knew that we would do the very best for him and that he'd live a great life and he'd live his life, whatever that was. But what saddened me, because I'd always loved books, and particularly children's picture books, was that he wouldn't see a picture book. And at the time, the books that were out there for children who were blind, they exist, but they're plastic tactile books, which are not nice. And so I said I was going to create some books for him. And I did. I actually created 3 books. And this is, my gosh, going back now 27 years, imagine. Oh, heck, Dave, I'm old. And so one of the first ones I came up with was Peter's Pocket. And it's just a sweet little story about this little boy who happens to be blind. And it goes through a week of his life and what he does. But it was tactile. I designed it to be tactile with actual objects. And I was really fortunate that way back then, all those 27 years ago, the W. Ross Macdonald School had a program funded by the government called the STAR program. And so they published my 3 books for a very short period of time until their funding was stopped. And so then that was it. And I tried myself to get my books developed, but we couldn't financially do it the way that they had been produced, because they were all handmade. And so like a book would cost like $100, $150, and that wasn't feasible. And then when we moved here, I retired early from teaching, loved being here, and I worked as a coach, sometimes still do. I don't do one-on-one coaching that often, but I have a few clients. But my passion for writing and children's books just resurfaced. And I decided to turn Peter's Pocket into a picture book. And that's how that came about. And it was all because I felt really sad that my son wouldn't have these tactile picture books and couldn't see a picture book.
It must have been an amazing, like, I mean, I can't even imagine. Like, I mean, you must have been so inspired. What's your son say now? Is he like, is it pretty cool that
It
this
is
is
so
about him?
cool. Well, the coolest part is that my son is my, oh gosh, what do you call it? So he's helped me put my books together, to be honest. So he's worked on all the, like the technical aspects of it. So I've written, and then I have to choose what the illustrations will be. I found a great illustrator to work with who happens to be a female from Iran. And so I feel really good about being able to support another female artist in a part of the world that is really having some difficulties right now, right? And so he literally he does all, he puts the book together. He helps me with choosing the font. And so it's been a wonderful experience collaborating with him. And at the back of Peter's Pocket, we even have a page where we've got some braille so people can see. It's not actual braille, so it's not tactile braille, but visual braille. So we've got the braille alphabet, and he designed that page. Took him such a long time, but I'm so proud of him because he did it. And so it's been exciting.
Do you have some stories you could share with us about, when that book came out and helping other kids? Like, it must have been so cool because
Yeah.
that's something they never had,
Yeah. So originally, when the tactile book came out, I was working in the vision program for the Toronto District School Board, and they purchased a couple of copies of each of the books. And so I would remember the teachers coming back and telling me they had used it with their students, young and old. And the feedback, the kids loved them because it was real, especially Peter's Pocket was really interactive. The kids were putting things in and taking things out, and it was a lot of fun. And there's, being an educator, it was one book, but you can talk about many different concepts. So I say that you can talk about numbers. You've got the days of the week in there, the idea of colors, which to a sighted person, you think, well, why is a child who's blind learning about colors? But it's the language. Right? It's important that language is understood. And as sighted people, we're constantly talking about how things look. And colors is a big part of early education in school, right? Kindergarten, grades 1, the early elementary school. And so that language development is important. And so there was the concepts of kindness and giving and sharing, independence, because here's this little boy, and throughout the story, he's doing things on his own. He's in the backyard playing in the sandbox by himself. There's not somebody hovering over him. And so these are all things that a sighted sibling could see. And it reinforces the idea that, just because you might be someone who's blind, you can still do what I'm doing. And I thought that was important. And then for children who are blind, they get to see, because we're supposed to be describing everything. So the intent is to describe the pictures there as well, not only feel them textually. And so the child is learning that here's this little boy, and he uses a white cane, but he walks by himself and he plays by himself, and he has friends, and he's going to his friend's house on his own. So I thought that was really important.
Yeah, and even for a child in a regular class without a disability to read this book, to understand that other component that we don't talk about much, but that's helping them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're right. So you had asked me, and I forgot to answer. Sorry. You had asked me how the reactions. So the teachers would come back, and they would all say that the kids really, really loved it. But for me, if I can share this, one of my most memorable moments was when I had first created the book and I was trying to get it published. I had some testers at the CNIB, and there was an older woman. So she was a grandmother. I mean, I'm a grandma, so I don't know how old she was. But her response was she cried because it was the first time she had seen a picture book. Like it made sense. It was developed so that it would make sense to a person who really had no sight and no experience with seeing things. Because a lot of times, even though we've got books, they're plastic and they make sense to us because we're sighted.
Right.
And so that was like one of my most memorable moments was having that feedback.
Let's step
Yeah.
back for a moment and talk
Mm-hmm.
about you, the author. Where did that come from? Have you always enjoyed writing? Was that just something it bubbles through? I know, and you and I have talked off air. I said,
Yes.
when a story comes to me,
Yeah.
it's wrapped up in emotion and I want to get it out onto a piece of paper because
Yeah.
there's something there and I don't know what it is, but I want to find it. And, it becomes a process. Is it the same for you, or where did, I love to read as a child, younger,
Too.
I love to read books, but
Yeah.
where did all of it start for you?
I think it did. It started as a child. I have always loved to read. Somewhere in my office here. So maybe next time when we chat, I'll hold it up. I've got one of my first books that was my dad bought actually. And I think at the time, do you remember Humpty Dumpty? There was
Yeah,
something to do with Humpty
nursery.
Dumpty books or some series where they would send you books. Anyhow, I still have it. Like I've always loved books, and I love them because you learn. Right? To me, it's a way of learning so much about other people, about other cultures. Is a way not only to escape but to discover yourself. I think, and so I've always loved reading. And then when I decided young that I wanted to go into education, I would go and buy picture books when I had no kids and when I wasn't even teaching because they were just beautiful. And so that's where my passion started. And then, like I said, when my son was born, the idea for Peter's Pocket just came. I said, all right, sit down, lady, come up with something good for your son. And honestly, that's what it was. And he was very sweet. I will say Richard Thomas, my son, not Peter. Peter is the book, but my son is Richard Thomas, is a very insightful, calm, thoughtful person. And so he really did inspire Peter's Pocket.
That's amazing. I love when those a story like that because it resonates with your ratings and as you're going through. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to touch base just for a sec if we can, because I
Sure.
want to know about the effect teaching in a Montessori. Because and for folks that maybe don't know what a Montessori is, we should explain that.
Mm.
But that probably brought you a long way too to getting you into that rating mode when you were working on your son's book. Did it?
Well, I think what Montessori was fantastic because for me, it really taught me the importance in life and in parenting as well to set that foundational work, because everything in Montessori builds. And so, people, I remember that, when my first year teaching, I had this little child. She was 3 years old, and she was the teeniest little thing. And her dad, to me at the time, seemed like he was 7 feet tall. He was this big, very astute businessman. And I remember during one open house, he came and he was very upset because he was spending a lot of money way back then, like 30 years ago, to send his child to school. And all she did was come home with these little square drawings that were like about this maybe 6 inches by 6 inches. And they had circles or ovals in them with lines through them. And he's like, what the heck is this? So I said, is it all right with you if I demonstrate? And I'm going to treat you like I would your child. And we did. I had him sit down. I didn't speak because in Montessori, your language is minimal. It's through observation. And so we went through the exercise and I demonstrated for him and then I asked him to do it. Well, he couldn't do it as good as his 3-year-old daughter. And it was that fine motor control, the concentration, the mental concentration, and the physical control, hand-eye coordination that is needed to do that little exercise. He got up and he said, thank you so much. I get it now. It was perfect. And that was it. And so to me, I carried that with me throughout my time teaching in the public school system and with my own children. Go slow. Those foundations are so important. And whether it's a foundation of a relationship with your child, the foundation of learning how to walk, let your child take their time. There's no reason to rush anything. And so Montessori was a very, very special time for me.
It's yeah, and I think just explaining to people that in a Montessori the development is more on the child's side.
Yes.
As it comes to them, it's not nothing's really pushed on them. It's like, okay, here's the learning process, and again, working on all those social skills which are critical at that 3, 4, 5 age, right?
Yeah,
in a child's life, and that's the foundation, right? That's what you're trying to build right there.
It was phenomenal. So we had children from 2.5 to 6 years of age in one classroom. And the intent is that the children would advance at their own rate. And so activities were presented to the child once they had mastered the previous activity. So for example, if someone doesn't know about Montessori, one of the activities was a table washing activity, and it was considered part of the life skills. But in order to do that one activity, because your tray had so many features on it, you needed to know how to pour water, right, and carry a tray, and then go through the sequence. So if you think of washing a table, it would literally take our whole time together to go through it properly. And so what I'll say is, think about what you would need to do to wash a table properly and all the materials that you need. And so that would be for the children one of the last steps that they learned in the life skills area. Because first they had to learn how to carry a tray with, let's say, rice in it without spilling anything. You'd have to learn how to pour without spilling. So each item on that tray was learned individually through another activity. And then the culmination was this table washing activity. But the kids loved it.
Yeah, was that kind of sensory orientated as well? Because all of a sudden, that's one of the big things too, right? When you talked about tactile earlier,
yes,
kids learning that different sensory piece would be such a big aspect of that, I guess. But interesting stuff.
It is fascinating, and it's natural, right? And it's in today's terms, we would say organic. So sensory in a very organic way, because you're feeling the water, you're like you're seeing the dirt, you're counting beads, learning how to count to 100 was with beads. You're feeling them, you're visually seeing them in groups of 10. It like a really lovely way.
The other aspect of that we should touch on real quick is because you're learning different ways.
Yes.
You're not learning one standard way, because I think every person learns differently. Right?
Yes.
I do. And I think that's, I might not be able to understand something as I'm reading it, but visually, if I'm doing it, I can pick it up a lot quicker. Yeah, it's really interesting. So let's talk a bit more about the book. How do people get the book? Where can they find you?
Oh, thank you. So right now it's available on Amazon. So it's through Amazon. And I should have had my little QR code, but I don't know if you have a link. Maybe they can just scan that QR code, and that brings you right there to the site. But it's my name. If you put in Lucia Bellafante books, then the books that are now currently available are there through Amazon.
I got to ask you too, will you come back sometime? I want to talk more about some of your other books.
I would love to.
And, I think I like talking the educational component too, because I think that's so critical. And there's a lot of things that we can sort of dive into. I know you and I off air had some great conversations that I think we should definitely challenge ourselves with down the road.
Absolutely.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it too. So everyone, go out there. It's a great book. I also say, can I say this?
Sure.
That we always think of giving a book to a child, but I don't know if anyone's gone out lately and purchased a card, like a birthday card or an anniversary card. Cards are so expensive. I like to gift books as cards these days to my adult friends, so if I know someone's gone through something in particular, I try to find a book that matches that and I gift them that book. And I think that's a nice added feature.
I think we could just go into that right there alone, just talking the value of any book, right? That
Yes.
if you pick one up,
Yeah.
it make it enjoyable. When you did touch on that, one thing I wanted to add to it was when you read a book.
Yes.
I like to read autobiographies, but when you read a book, visually in your mind, you're creating that story. And I think that's very freeing, like you talked about earlier.
Yes.
When you do that, then you're seeing things in a different light too. The context changes.
Mm-hmm.
And what you get out of the book, what I might get out of a certain book might be different from you, but we're both getting something. So I think I think we can tell people to read more. I don't know if they will, but we can tell them.
Oh my goodness, right? I know reading is so amazing. Wow, we'll have to have a Braille literacy conversation one day.
Yes,
because
sure.
that's also a big debate with technology, but there's a difference between learning how to read and write and, having something be accessible through technology. Very big difference, the skills, what you get out of it, the independence.
Hey, is that Peter's Pocket right up behind you there? I think I see
It is.
There it is, folks. There's the cover. So we'll get that on our on the intro to this podcast. But thank you for taking the time today. We could go on and on and on, but I know I've got work to do. You've got work to do. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me. Take care.